Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships, and the only bit of saved footage I have from the previous patch, I think I'd had a couple of replays up already, so this one's going to be a 30 FPS video as a result, because we're still having some rather severe frame rate issues, and that's still been the case in 9.9, but I found by turning the, was it like the extra effects setting or particle effects, or I can't remember, there was some effects setting that after some fiddling I found if I turned that one down specifically it really helped the frame rate out, so that's how I've been able to go back up to higher frame rate recordings. So this is the Richelieu Tier 8 French battleship, speed boost, 8 15-inch guns in quad turrets in an all-forward arrangement, and it's a reasonably strong ship in-game. I mean, it's one of the more interesting real-life designs. Quad turrets were not particularly popular just because of the extra difficulties that having that many guns crammed into a single turret entailed, but the French had a go at it anyway, and it was also, because it's a treaty design in this unusual all-forwards arrangement as the Nelson and Rodney were, but unlike Nelson and Rodney, this is rather faster and I think probably better armoured, but I'm not actually sure. You'd have to ask someone like Drachenfell which is the better treaty battleship design, because Nelson and Rodney slower, I think less armoured, and of course bigger guns. But if you look at their kind of actual effectiveness during the war, I mean, Nelson and Rodney did a heck of a lot more. Although, of course, Jean Bart was somewhat active itself as well. It's just when you look at Nelson and Rodney, well, particularly, was it Nelson? Or was it Rodney? I can't remember. One of them did a lot, and the other did a lot of sailing around, but didn't actually fight in many battles, or if any. Anyway, I'm sort of vaguely half trying to remember actual naval history now, which is always, you know, it's not a good idea. It's a bad plan. I'll inevitably get it wrong. So maybe I'll talk about the actual game instead. So RZ-39 has had a bit of a rough time of it, but they did manage to torp the enemy Scorner, being one of the two enemy destroyers. So that's pretty good news for our team. The bad news is, however, the Edinburgh, while that was going on, capped, and they've also capped over in A as well. It seems without any particular like, our team hasn't tried to contest the A cap particularly hard, despite quite a few of our team being over there. You know, the team is split fairly evenly. I think the other side's got like one more ship than this flank, but overall, yeah, it seems like they might have done a better job contesting. But this is still early days yet, and so it's not really the time to panic. It's just, it would be nice if we at least had one cap at this stage, because we are 5 minutes into this already. I myself have been playing this fairly cautiously so far, just sitting and facing bow in. I mean, it's a top tier game, so the armour is going to be a lot more effective than it would bottom tier, and I've actually managed to do a somewhat decent amount of damage already as well. That Nagato has not been super well angled, although they are going to get to live for a little while yet. We also have what is that, an Amagi pressing down that flank, and I have a feeling the Z-39 is not long for this world at this point. They've managed to get themselves spotted, although they are landing some torpedoes. Now if I can land some good hits myself, and it's an Edinburgh showing quite a bit of broadside, then maybe I can obliterate them and possibly save the Amagi. But as, not the Amagi, the Z-39, but as is, it's actually the Amagi that gets the kill, although it's come at a high cost, and the Edinburgh's not looking too healthy now either. So there goes the Amagi, who they weren't trying to dodge or anything like that. I mean, they knew there was a destroyer in the vicinity, and they just kind of sailed straight past that gap without particularly trying to defensively maneuver. So we see exactly how that worked out for them. And if the Z-39 had more hit points, they probably would have lived. The Edinburgh has also gone down, And I'm backing up. I'm not entirely sure why I was backing up here, to be quite honest. I had no particular reason to. There was nobody with torpedoes around. It's not like there's any kind of big guns threatening me. It's not like I need to go dark in order to pop a heel. I don't know. I can't explain that. That just was me randomly reversing and then realizing that, oh, maybe I don't need to do that after all. So we've largely cleared this cap out. The Nagato, as I've said that weird, Nagato is still somehow alive. They've been reversing back up to the sea line, and they've taken multiple hits from me and others, but still not dead yet. New Orleans also has taken a bit of damage from me and has wisely decided to run away, which just leaves the North Carolina, who is also reversing. Now, they've managed to kill our Otago, but they're in a bit of a sticky situation, and I did briefly consider coming out in front of them, but that really wouldn't have been optimal, because it looks like they're just backing up broadside. And I can probably use that to my advantage, hence using the speed boost here to try and get round that corner before they can back up to an angle that's less favourable to me. However, the Nagato has reappeared and is now charging forward once again. Not the wisest move, I would have said, for someone with their level of hit points. So I kind of have my element of surprise a bit ruined right now, but we might as well finish them off. Meanwhile, the Colorado has capped, and that Colorado is actually going to be an important player on our team. And on the other flank, we lost our destroyer over there, and that whole group of ships is just backing off. They don't seem to have particularly fought very hard over that cap. The enemy team just has displaced them towards the sea cap quite easily, and that's their remaining destroyer, probably headed for the sea cap as well. We do have a Cleveland there at least, so hopefully they can do something to screen, but yeah, that's not looking so good. So the North Carolina's backed up, the Key's been pushing into them as well, and actually there's the remaining destroyer, but I meanwhile have a perfect broadside on this guy, and I'm hoping for some citadels, but alas, it's not going to be, although I will still get some fairly chunky damage out of this North Carolina, just by virtue of them apparently not really having paid attention to the fact that I was boosting forward around the island to get them. Now, the instinct was, I was a bit torn here, you know, do I finish off the North Carolina? Do I try and bring the turrets around on that destroyer, which would have taken a while? And so I kept my turrets facing where there was something I knew I could shoot at, and hoped that the Colorado wouldn't eat a whole bunch of torpedoes. And to their credit, they seem to have used the islands and not eaten a whole bunch of torpedoes, so they are safe for the time being. But it does mean the cap's contested, so we're not getting anything from there at the moment. Now, as our group of ships down south has been retreating and getting whittled away, they have at least been doing some damage as that's happening. So the enemy team is now, all things considered, down to only 4 ships, and although it's still close on points, I was starting to feel rather more confident at this stage. I mean, I've done a fair bit of damage without having to take too much myself. I think this has been a fairly ideal set of circumstances for something like the Richelieu, being able to comfortably bow tank, not have to worry about too much HE spam or big nasty guns such as the Musashis, and not having to worry about, you know, carrier drops, which is always a problem when you're sitting bow facing somebody and trying not to maneuver too much. And so overall, yeah, this has certainly been a much more of a comfortable game for this ship than I have experienced in other matches. But even so, the amount of damage I'm going to get out of this, I think this might be one of my highest, if not end up being my highest damage game in a Richelieu. The guns aren't normally this reliable. And I've only had 2 citadels out of it. The rest of it's all just been pen damage. So 3 ships left. We've got, what, double that number, and we're now ahead on points. So I'm just boosting towards the cap and towards the remaining enemies, and all we need to do now is just finish mopping up. And the only dangerous ship as far as I'm concerned is that Nelson. They do also have an Alba left, and that Normandy, and I was complacent. I was thinking, okay, she said Normandy? That's not anything to worry about. They've got some rather rotten matchmaking. What are they going to do to me? Well, as it turns out, well, I get a nice broadside hit there again. No citadels, but still 14k is pretty damn solid. And I made the cardinal mistake of putting that fire out. They're absolutely doing the right sensible thing by firing HE. That's like, what, 13.5-inch guns on that ship? I think Leon has the same caliber, it just has more of them. And to be fair with them giving me a broadside, you kind of have to do that to fire all your guns. But yeah, that's the right thing to do when you've got a down-tiered battleship with small caliber guns. You try and set fires, because it's a far more reliable source of damage than if you are firing AP. If you've got broadsides, then sure, stick with the AP, but if you're firing against an angled battleship, then you know your AP is just going to bounce or shatter, unless you get superstructure pens, then HE is absolutely the right thing to do. And because I put out that single fire, he's now got 1 burning and the potential of burning even more. So yeah, there's another one. Me being complacent and thinking, oh yeah, it's just a Normandy, has kind of cost me. He might actually burn me out, and even if he does, we're still going to win, but it's going to be a little bit embarrassing. Now, I have been in that Normandy's position more often with the Fuso than anything else. I've had bottom tier games with the Fuso where you have the range, you have the dozen guns, and you have far less awkward angles than the Normandy, and a pretty good rate of fire as well. And you can just keep hitting higher tier battleships with that HE, and the Japanese battleship HE isn't anything special, but it doesn't need to be. You just need to keep hitting them over and over again, and it still has a decent fire chance. So yeah, that Normandy, if I'd been a bit lower health going into that engagement, probably could have burned me out. But as it was, I survived and managed to get the Fireproof and Dreadnought award. Now, like I said, that Colorado did some real heavy lifting there as well. I mean, they actually got, while I was faffing around, 6 kills and north of 2,500 base XP, so they were the real MVP in this particular game. The Key also seemed to do alright. Meanwhile, of the surviving ships, the Gneisenau was way down at the bottom there, so I don't know if they were just having an unlucky game with their RNG, or they just weren't being particularly effective with their aiming. Sometimes hard to tell with the Gneisenau, because of course you only have the 6 guns, but either way, that was a little bit shaky for parts of that, but once we had won that eastern flank and were able to start pushing around and putting pressure on the other side, they hadn't really done enough of the same. They were chasing our surviving ships, and they were kind of forced to chase our surviving ships over on the western flank, because if they'd ignored them and pressed over into the middle, I mean, if it's the 3 cap circle setup, that might have worked better, but for the 4 cap circle setup on that map, yeah, they pushed out our team and blocked them from ever capping A, but that was kind of like the most they ever managed on that flank. So as it turned out, a very good damage result for me, and a reasonably good win. But like I said, it really was the Colorado that was the MVP in that one. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, because apparently it really does help the channel when you do things like hit subscribe and hit the bell and hit the like button and all that jazz, and comments, and apparently it all feeds into the mysterious voodoo that is the YouTube algorithm. So yeah. So all that's left to say is, as always, stay tuned for more.